Jan turned 60 on the 26th of January 2008. Flowers and chocolates from Paul and Catherine came first thing, followed by breakfast in bread and a new garden trug containing Thornton's chocolates, terry mints, 12 Cadbury's eggs, a teddy, a terracotta snail and truffles. 6 tea. 16 people took part in this year's Lent course entitled Life Calling, and parts of the film Billy Elliot were viewed each week. On Mothering Sunday, Barbara Bartlett and I baked a cake as part of the sermon. On Easter Day it snowed heavily, but most of the services went ahead still. In April we went on a touring holiday of Greece, followed by a 4-day cruise around the islands in the Aegean Sea.
Thank you. Cheers.
At last we joined broadband, enticed by AOL's offer of a free laptop computer. This year the Benefice Wit Walk began with communion at Thorpe Mandeville. Then 12 of us walked across the fields via the Magpie to Selgrave. After a post-service lunch, we then walked over to Morton Pinckney for evensong. The weather was just right. Having lost so much bird food to the local squirrels, Jan purchased a squirrel-proof bird feeder. As this photograph, which we sent to the manufacturers, demonstrates, it did not exactly work. We had a visit from Mum and Dad for 3 nights. We visited Salsey Forest and climbed up the treetop walkway, and then discovered Green Farm, which was the home of Mum's mother, Nancy Cook, when her father was a farmer on the Salsey estate. Paul and Catherine took Jan to the Crop Ready Folk Festival, where Fairport Convention were performing, as a treat for her 60th birthday. Unfortunately it poured with rain the whole day, but they stuck it out until the end, at midnight. We took a flat in Porthcurno, Cornwall, where by coincidence Mike and Mary Gibbons of Chipping Warden had lived in the 1960s when they were working for Cable and Wireless, and we visited the Minack Theatre, which had been established by the aunt of Gerald Cadogan, our neighbour in Culworth. At a house sit in Oxford we encountered a shy, jumpy rescue dog named Bella. The dog was very nervous, and every time I said "good girl," she responded with a sharp woof. Jan and I drove down to Amersham for the funeral of Auntie Edna. Afterwards we shared a buffet with Jan's cousins, and there was a sudden realization that Edna was the last of her generation, and that we were next in the firing line. In September we visited Chapeltown to celebrate Dad's 80th birthday, and from there drove up to Pateley Bridge for a week's break. Paul, Catherine and Skye came by train from Bristol, and we travelled together to Shire Oaks, where Caroline married Sean Cummings, who lived in Rockland St Mary. It was a very cold winter in 2009. After we returned from the visit to Basingstoke at the New Year, it took us 4 days to reheat the house. There were 5 funerals in January, and the snow was such that I had to walk across the fields to take one of them. Jan and I had to dig out the driveway up to the rectory several times. Paul, Catherine and Skye came to Culworth on Good Friday in preparation for us to drive up to Worksop the following day for Mum's 80th birthday celebratory lunch, after which Skye stayed with us for a week. Thorpe Mandeville PCC decided that the parents of a baby who had died 4 years earlier should be asked to reduce the number of days in the year when toys and wind chimes were hung from the tree above his grave. I was not at all sure that this was a good idea, and lo and behold, soon the local press had taken up the story. And while this was going on, I was also facing graveyard issues in the other 5 churches over such things as grass cutting and questions regarding memorial stones and reserving grave space. It must have been the time of year. With the kitchen and toilet complete at Chipping Warden Church, at a cost of some £50,000 due to following English heritage regulations, a working party cleaned the place out, and then we had a full weekend at Petertide with a brass band concert, songs of praise, and a gift day followed by communion service. Kathy Hoggins arranged for Barbara Bartlett, who coordinated the whole project, to be presented with flowers and champagne at the end of the Songs of Praise service. Rachel Ulmer, who worked in Lahore as a teacher, came to stay. Paul and Skye came by train and we spent a day at Alton Towers. Jan and I joined them on the 2 extreme rides, Air and Oblivion. It seemed that we were the oldest people on the rides. We purchased an Epson Perfection V300 photo scanner, and I began the process of digitizing all our negatives, slides and photographs. Andrew was about to begin a 6-month pilot's course at Oxford Airport and asked if he might park his caravan at Culworth Rectory. On the way to Chapeltown I called in at Shire Oaks to give my theological books to Sean, who was beginning a ministry course at St John's College. I also looked at Andrew's caravan, and we soon realised that it would not get into our drive. So in November, Andrew moved into the guest bedroom at Culworth Rectory. The diocese issued a ruling that due to the swine flu pandemic, Holy Communion was to be issued in one kind, bread only, and clergy were to be seen cleaning their hands with antibacterial gel and not shaking hands so as to avoid spreading infection. This was probably a good thing, as there were a number of vulnerable people in our congregations. 2010 began with a funeral for a local farmer, Fred Thame. His family refused to pay the church fees via the undertaker as is the normal practice, and then were late in paying the fees directly to the parish. I wondered if we were going to receive them at all. Fred Tame's grandson Robert, who had been one of those who with Otis Ferry had invaded the House of Commons with a pro-hunting protest, gave a tribute in which he announced that the Bicester hunt was going out the following day to disturb and kill as many foxes as possible. Lo and behold, the next day, Jan had difficulty getting through to Daventry as the road was blocked for ages with huntsmen, horses and dogs. Along with the squirrels in our garden I noticed a number of rats that it seemed were living in the grass pile by the shed. So I called in the council rat man, who put poison down. When Jan and I cleared away the grass, we found the bodies. I felt very bad about it, but I'm sure that I did the right thing, as they would have soon begun breeding. We also emptied the compost bin and decided only to put leaves and weeds in it in the future. The rats have been finding a way up from the base of it to eat the peelings that we've been putting there. After another holiday in the Wye Valley, Jan suddenly suggested that we drive down to Chepstow to look at 4 houses that she had seen on the internet. This we did, and we put in an offer which was accepted for $385,000 on 28 Penterry Park. Drove up to Moor Road to meet our new tenant Sue, who was a taxi driver in Whitehaven. I asked her if she had known the taxi driver Derek Bird, who had a month before gone on the rampage shooting many people in the area. She had, and had often driven him home in her taxi on days when he was off duty. Sue talked about the incident for a long time. It must have really disturbed her. A friend had phoned her to tell her what was happening, and so she locked herself in the house in case Bird had decided to add her to his list. While staying with Margaret and Calder in Watford, Mum delivered a copy of her book, Too Quiet for Sparrows, to Margaret Thatcher's home.